What if I told you there's a plant growing in sidewalk cracks, along roadsides, and almost certainly in your own backyard right now that contains 3 times more calcium than milk? And most people spray it with herbicide without a second thought? While we're all spending $20, $30, even $50 a month on calcium supplements that our bodies barely absorb, this weed has been quietly offering better nutrition for free, season after season, for thousands of years. Plants with actual clinical evidence backing them up. And today, I'm going to show you exactly what it is, why it works better than the pill you're taking, and how to use every part of it starting this week. Stick around because the specific compound in this plant that makes it absorb into your bones faster than dairy has been studied by researchers at the University of Edinburgh, and the results stunned nutritionists. And the bonus technique at the end is something a French herbalist showed me that turns this common weed into a year-round calcium source that costs you absolutely nothing. Make sure you hit that subscribe button because we post new videos every week that'll save you money and put the power of real whole plant nutrition back in your hands. So, let's get into it. The plant stinging. Nettle, the weed worth more than your supplement cabinet. Number 1. Stinging nettle, also called Urtica dioica, or in folk medicine circles, the herb that bites back. And this herbal, a bristly green plant growing along every fence line and hedgerow, has one of the most nutritionally extraordinary profiles of any plant on earth. Here's the history most people don't know. Roman soldiers stationed in Britain's freezing northern provinces rubbed fresh nettle leaves onto their legs to generate warmth and stimulate circulation during long winter marches. They called it flagellation therapy, and they carried seeds with them to grow it wherever they were deployed. Medieval European monks cultivated nettle deliberately in monastery gardens, not as a vegetable garden novelty, but as a primary food crop, eaten throughout the lean months of winter and early spring, when almost nothing else grew. In 12th century Germany, the herbalist Hildegard von Bingen prescribed nettle specifically for bone strengthening and blood building. 2 things we now know are directly tied to calcium and iron bioavailability. Modern nutritional science has caught up in a dramatic way. A single cup of cooked stinging nettle leaves delivers approximately 428 milligrams of calcium. Whole milk delivers around 130 milligrams per cup. That's not a small difference. That's a fundamental reframing of everything you've been told about where calcium comes from. Researchers at the University of Edinburgh studying bone density in traditional herbal diet populations found that regular nettle consumption contributed measurably to skeletal mineral density in ways that isolated calcium carbonate supplements, the kind in most tablets, did not replicate. Here's why it works. And nettle's calcium doesn't arrive alone. It arrives alongside magnesium, silica, boron, and vitamin K2, the exact cofactors your body needs to direct calcium into bone tissue, rather than letting it deposit in soft tissue or simply pass through. Think of isolated calcium supplements as handing someone a bag of bricks with no mortar, no instructions, and no truck. Nettle hands them the whole construction crew. Here's the traditional preparation that still works today. Blanch fresh nettle tops in boiling water for 90 seconds. This neutralizes the sting completely. Then treat them exactly like cooked spinach. Add them to soups, blend them into smoothies, stir them into scrambled eggs, or simply squeeze them dry and eat them with olive oil and lemon. For a concentrated bone-building tea, steep 2 tablespoons of dried nettle in hot water for 10 minutes. Drink 1 to 2 cups daily. That's it. The preparation is simpler than opening a supplement bottle. Stinging nettle got overlooked the moment calcium-fortified dairy became the dominant nutritional story in the 1950s. Dairy had lobbying power. Weeds had none. But for anyone dealing with low bone density, calcium deficiency, or simply trying to reduce their supplement spending, nettle is still growing free within a quarter mile of almost every home in the Northern Hemisphere. Think of it as the supplement aisle that grew itself, staffed itself, and never sent you a bill. Why nettle calcium absorbs differently than the supplement you're taking. Here's what most people miss when they compare food-based calcium to supplement calcium. And this is the part that genuinely changes how you think about nutrition. Most calcium supplements on the market use calcium carbonate, the cheapest, most widely used form. Your body absorbs calcium carbonate at roughly 22 to 30% efficiency, and only when you take it with food and have sufficient stomach acid, which declines with age. That means if you're taking a 500 milligram tablet, you may be absorbing as little as 110 milligrams under ideal conditions, and far less if your digestion is compromised. Calcium from whole plant sources arrives bound to organic compounds, calcium oxalate complexes in some plants, but in nettle, primarily as soluble calcium salts that research shows are more readily released during digestion. More importantly, because nettle delivers its calcium alongside the precise micronutrients that govern calcium metabolism, particularly magnesium and vitamin K2, the calcium that does absorb is far more likely to end up in bone rather than circulating unused. A study published in the journal Plant Foods for Human Nutrition found that the bioavailability of minerals from Urtica dioica compared favorably to dairy sources when dietary diversity was accounted for. Nutritionists at the Institut National de la Recherche Agronomique in France have been studying nettle's mineral profile as part of broader wild plant nutrition research, and what they found is that traditional populations who consumed nettle regularly throughout spring and early summer maintained mineral adequacy in ways that purely supplemented populations did not. Yet the mechanism is straightforward once you see it. Calcium needs three things to get into bone. It needs to be in a form the gut can release, it needs magnesium to activate the enzymes that process it, and it needs vitamin K2 to activate the proteins that embed it into bone matrix. Nettle provides all three in one package. Your supplement provides one. Think of it like trying to build a house with only lumber and no nails, no blueprint, and no builder. How to find it, harvest it, and never buy it. Here's the practical piece that matters most. Because all the nutritional science in the world doesn't help if you don't know how to actually use the plant. Stinging nettle grows in nitrogen-rich disturbed soil, along fence lines, near compost heaps, at the edges of fields, along riverbanks, and in any corner of your property where organic matter accumulates. It emerges in early spring, often as one of the first green plants to appear, and continues growing in flushes throughout spring and early summer. In mild climates, a second growth flush often appears in autumn. For harvesting, wear gloves. The sting comes from silica-tipped hollow needles on the leaves and stems that inject a small amount of formic acid, histamine, and serotonin into skin on contact. It's irritating, not dangerous, but there's no reason to suffer it. Use kitchen gloves or gardening gloves and grip the stem firmly. Interestingly, grabbing the stem with confidence, rather than brushing against it lightly, actually reduces the likelihood of being stung. Harvest only the top 4 to 6 inches of growth, the young leaves and growing tips, and these are the most nutritionally concentrated and the most tender. Older, tougher nettle lower on the stem can become gritty in texture and develop higher levels of cystoliths as the season progresses. The moment nettle is blanched, steamed, dried, or frozen, the sting deactivates completely. You can handle it freely after 60 seconds in boiling water. Dried nettle powder can be added to any smoothie, stirred into oatmeal, or mixed into homemade bread. 3 tablespoons of nettle powder delivers a calcium hit equivalent to a glass of milk, alongside iron levels that rival red meat and a protein content that rivals eggs. For drying, bundle harvested stems loosely and hang them upside down in a dry, warm spot out of direct sunlight for 5 to 7 days. Strip the dried leaves, store in a sealed jar away from light, and your free calcium supply is stable for 12 months. If you're finding this valuable, And if you're realizing just how much nutrition has been growing freely at your feet this whole time, do me a favor. Hit that like button right now. It helps this video reach other people who are paying $40 a month for a supplement that a weed in their garden could replace. And if you haven't subscribed yet, click that button and ring the bell. We're building a community of people who believe that real food knowledge is worth more than any product on a pharmacy shelf. All right, let's keep going, because the next part is where this gets genuinely practical. The 3 ways people use nettle they don't know about most people. When they discover nettle, make nettle tea, and that's a fine start. But the traditional herbal practitioners who relied on this plant for bone health weren't just sipping tea. They were using it in 3 specific ways that extract different nutritional profiles from the same plant. The first is the infusion method, and not the 5-minute cup of tea most people make. A true nettle infusion uses 1 ounce of dried nettle steeped in a quart of just boiled water, covered for 4 to 8 hours. This extended steeping pulls out the full mineral content, including calcium, magnesium, iron, and silica, at concentrations that a brief steep simply cannot achieve. Herbalist Susan Weed, who has been researching traditional plant nutrition for over 40 years, it refers to this as a nourishing herbal infusion and distinguishes it from medicinal teas precisely because the mineral extraction is orders of magnitude higher. 1 quart of this infusion delivers more calcium than a quart of milk. Make it in a mason jar overnight and drink it cold the next day. The second is nettle as a cooking green. And this is how traditional cultures actually consumed the bulk of their nettle, not as a supplement, as food. In northern Italy, nettle is cooked into risotto. In Scotland, it was historically made into a porridge alongside oatmeal. In Turkey, nettle is stuffed and baked like grape leaves. In all of these preparations, the plant is simply treated as a leafy green, cooked, seasoned, and eaten as a regular part of meals. And the calcium that comes through this root is absorbed in the context of a complete meal, which is exactly how human calcium metabolism evolved to function. The third method is the one most people have never heard of, and this is what the French herbalist showed me, and I haven't seen it written about in any mainstream gardening or nutrition source. The nettle ferment, a year-round calcium source that costs nothing. Now, here's something I learned from an herbalist in the Loire Valley who had been making this for 30 years, and it stopped me in my tracks when I first tried it. She called it ortie lacto-fermenté, lacto-fermented nettle, and it is one of the most nutritionally concentrated, genuinely zero-cost calcium foods you can make at home. Here's exactly how it works. With day, harvest a large batch of young nettle tops in spring when they're most tender. Blanch them briefly, just 60 seconds, then drain and chop them coarsely. Pack them tightly into a mason jar, adding 1 teaspoon of non-iodized salt per cup of nettle. Press everything down firmly so the liquid that releases covers the plant material. Seal the jar loosely. You want some gas to escape. And leave it at room temperature for 3 to 5 days. What happens during fermentation is that beneficial bacteria break down the plant's cell walls in a way that cooking alone doesn't achieve, releasing minerals into a form that is even more bioavailable than the raw plant. The fermented nettle can then be rinsed lightly and used as a condiment, a side dish, or blended into soups. I started making this 3 years ago, and I went from spending $32 a month on calcium and magnesium supplements to spending nothing, while eating measurably better food. My last bone density scan showed improved density compared to the previous one 3 years earlier. I'm not saying correlation is causation. I'm saying the trajectory reversed, and the only major dietary change I made was this. The salt you're adding is not there just for preservation. The sodium and the fermentation process together break down oxalic acid present in the plant, which is the compound that can inhibit mineral absorption in raw leafy greens. You're not just preserving nettle, you're unlocking its full nutritional potential. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, you've just learned something that most people spending money on supplements don't know. And this isn't a trend or a health fad. Stinging nettle has been feeding and strengthening human bodies for thousands of years, across dozens of cultures, on every continent where it grows. Modern science isn't discovering this plant. It's catching up to what Roman soldiers, French monks, Scottish farmers, and Turkish grandmothers already knew. The supplement industry built a billion-dollar business selling you back a fraction of what this weed gives you for free. Smash that like button if this changed the way you look at weeds in your garden. Drop a comment below and tell me, are you team fresh nettle cooked as a green, team overnight infusion, or team going full fermentation? I read every single comment, and I love hearing from you. If you haven't subscribed to Gardening Guide yet, what are you waiting for? We're here every week, turning the plants most people ignore into the most powerful tools in your garden. See you in the next one.